Bien, buenos días. En primer lugar, disculpar el retraso, dado que la tecnología está para que falle. Claro, evidentemente, si no estuviera, pues no podríamos transmitir nada. Por lo tanto, estas cosas suelen pasar. En segundo lugar, quisiera excusar la asistencia de la vicerrectora María Dolores Salvador, que está de viaje por la zona de Andalucía y, por lo tanto, vengo yo en su representación, que soy el director de área, Francisco Espinós. Es para mí un honor estar en mi escuela y presidir este acto, tanto como director de área como miembro nato de la propia escuela. Por lo tanto, se puede decir que estoy en mi casa y rodeado de amigos. Por otra parte, me tenía preparado algo, pero con el tema del retraso, pues del cambio climático, van a hablar ustedes durante 2 días y yo les deseo que encuentren pues las mejores tecnologías verdes para poder aplicar en un mercado global, ¿no? Sería un poco para mí el objetivo máximo, ¿no? Sabe que se ha hablado mucho de huella de carbono, se ha hablado mucho, o menos quizás, de huella hídrica. Se habla mucho de fertilizantes, se habla poco de calidades del agua. Hay que gastar menos y tener mejor calidad del agua para todos nuestros cultivos. Yo creo que ese también sería otro objetivo básico. Y después, qué duda cabe, resaltar pues un poco la estructura o la herramienta de cátedras en nuestra universidad. Hemos, digamos, en un año de mandato ha aumentado el 33% el número de cátedras, un incremento muy importante, quizás no se conoce en toda la historia de la universidad, tanto cátedras institucionales como cátedras puramente de empresa. Verdaderamente lo fundamental ya no solo es la empresa, digamos, en la universidad, sino el propio director de esa cátedra o directora que va a hacer de filamento tractor y, por lo tanto, va a realizar eventos como el que estamos, ¿no? Que de alguna manera con esta retransmisión en streaming pues pueden incluso conectarse alumnos, compañeros, colaboradores, etcétera, etcétera. Bien, pues no me quiero extender más porque ya llevamos media hora de retraso. Lo que tenía preparado, que tenía aquí un dueto en inglés y en castellano, pues lo dejaremos para otro momento. Creo que lo importante es empezar a trabajar, lo importante son los conferenciantes lo que tengan que decir y los asistentes las dudas y lo que puedan preguntar. Así pues, yo doy aquí por finalizada mi intervención y paso la palabra a Loreto Fenollar.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias, don Francisco Espinós, director de área de cátedras de empresa y empleo. Sé que su agenda es muy ajustada, con lo cual se lo tenemos que agradecer que hoy esté aquí. Don Vicente Domènech, director de Investigación y Desarrollo de Stoller Europe. Compañeros, estudiantes, bienvenidos, welcome, benvinguts, todos y todas a la Escuela Técnica Superior de Ingeniería Agronómica y del Medio Natural de la Universitat Politécnica de Valencia. Como subdirectora de cátedras de esta escuela, agradezco la confianza depositada por la empresa Stoller y como codirectora de la cátedra Stoller junto con el profesor Sergio González, no podemos dejar pasar esta ocasión para agradecer tanto a la escuela como a la empresa que haya contado con nosotros para llevar a cabo esta tarea. La relación entre la empresa y la universidad a través de las cátedras de empresa tiene como principal finalidad desarrollar actividades de interés general para toda la comunidad universitaria, ofreciendo una formación extraacadémica muy ligada a los problemas reales que aparecen en la sociedad, que hoy en día aparecen de una manera muy rápida y de una manera globalizada, de manera que en el entorno universitario, que es complicado adaptar las asignaturas con la rapidez con que se van generando esos cambios, intentamos que a través de las cátedras de empresa se puedan ofrecer a la comunidad universitaria esa formación de una manera más ágil. Un conocimiento actualizado y, sobre todo, un conocimiento que está relacionado con lo que realmente preocupa a la sociedad. Por tanto, desde las cátedras se trata de compartir el conocimiento académico y entrar en contacto con un entorno innovador, con un entorno científico-técnico. En el caso de la cátedra Stoller, la finalidad que se planteó en el momento de su firma fue la promoción y desarrollo de la ingeniería agronómica focalizada en el campo de la fisiología vegetal, buscando a través de la investigación se trataría de mejorar el conocimiento, así como los productos al servicio de la producción agrícola, al servicio del sector agroalimentario. Seguramente todos y todas los que vamos a participar en estas jornadas estamos directamente relacionados con este sector agroalimentario, sector de crecimiento, un sector motor de la bioeconomía, entendiendo como bioeconomía el conjunto de esas actividades que llevan a obtener un valor añadido usando unos recursos de origen biológico. Pues bien, según los datos de Jones Research Center, el sector de la bioeconomía generaba en España en 2017 un volumen de negocio de 219.366 millones de euros, lo que representa un 9% del total de la Unión Europea. 65.132 millones de euros del valor añadido, lo que representa un 10% del total de la Unión Europea, y 1,42 millones de empleos, lo que representa un 8% del total de la Unión Europea. Por tanto, estamos ante un sector que es muy, muy importante en toda la Unión Europea. Además, nos encontramos en un sector que tiene mucho que aportar al ámbito de la sostenibilidad, puesto que está muy vinculado a los 3 primeros objetivos de desarrollo sostenible: la erradicación de la pobreza, el hambre cero, la salud y el bienestar, y de manera paralela a otros muchos objetivos y metas como la acción por el clima. Tema principal de las presentes jornadas, que van a hablar sobre el cambio climático y la eficiencia en el uso de los nutrientes. Realmente se presenta como un gran reto para toda la agricultura moderna. Desde el inicio, la cátedra Stoller, con una pandemia de por medio, una guerra, una situación económica complicada, ha llevado a cabo distintas actividades con el fin de compartir este conocimiento, entre las que destacaría los proyectos de investigación que han sido liderados por Salvador López Galarza y también el catedrático Sergio González. También se han realizado trabajos con alumnos en prácticas UPV y se ha participado tanto en los anuarios de la escuela como en la memoria institucional de la universidad, así como en diferentes medios, como por ejemplo se publicó el artículo en el blog de la escuela titulado La agricultura frente al COVID-19 de Sergio Aguilar en el año 2020. Las jornadas técnicas que iniciamos hoy son un paso más, un gran paso con el objetivo de esta cátedra, de la cátedra Stoller, en el que querer compartir conocimiento, en el entrar en contacto con el entorno innovador, este entorno científico-técnico es muy importante. Es por ello que se ha invitado a ponentes que son grandes profesionales de gran nivel. La organización de estas jornadas no ha sido tarea fácil, pero sí ilusionante y, desde luego, un proceso de aprendizaje. Debemos agradecer el esfuerzo de Santi Bernabéu y todo su equipo, Pamela, Alba Azul, Vicente Domènech y, desde luego, el apoyo de toda la empresa Stoller. Les deseo a todos y a todas unas felices y fructíferas jornadas.
Buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias por tus palabras, Loreto. Estamos completamente alineados y completamente comprometidos en este proyecto. Vamos a estructurar las charlas en 2 días que focalizarán en 2 de los más actuales problemas que vamos a encontrarnos, no solamente en la actualidad, sino en un futuro próximo, como es el cambio climático y el uso eficiente de nutrientes o de fertilización. A lo largo de estos 2 días desarrollaremos 8 ponencias, 4 por día, 2 por la mañana y 2 por la tarde, con un impasse para la comida que separará las 2 ponencias de cada parte del día de ponencias. Habrá servicio continuo de café y cualquier requerimiento que ustedes tengan a lo largo de las jornadas se les puede trasladar a los asistentes. Llegados a este punto, voy a cambiar de lengua porque también intentando dar respuesta a todos aquellos que están conectados en streaming desde los diferentes países en los que han confirmado la conexión para la asistencia a estas charlas, creemos que es la mejor manera de poder acceder a todos ustedes. Tienen servicio de traducción simultánea, con lo cual no hay problema ninguno. Before starting with these presentations and these Stoller Chair Technical Sessions, I would like to give you a global view about the event. Stoller Europe welcomes all the attenders to the first International Stoller Chair Technical Sessions in the Universidad Politécnica de Valencia. We would like to extend our special thanks to Mr. Francisco Espinós and Ms. Loreto Fenollosa as academic representation in this event opening. And moreover, the 8 speakers who will develop the presentations and all the people involved in this event setting and development for attending and collaborate in such a generous and committed way. Stoller Chair, as Loreto explained before, in plant physiology was signed in 2020 with Universidad Politécnica de Valencia in order to support Stoller's continuous commitment in applied plant physiology researching and agronomic engineering promotion, in a decision always aligned with the company values. The framework agreement between the Agronomy Engineering School of the UPV and the Stoller comes in 2 parts, a medium long-term researching project on nutrient use efficiency and root system physiological development, and another one focused in different global interest activities intended to promote with university values, students' skill development, and agronomy promotion, like the one that you are just starting. These technical sessions that will be developed along this 2 days event will be focused in 2 of the most important subjects for farming at this moment. As I say, nutrient use efficiency and climate change impact on agriculture. Both have a relevant and clear incidence in agriculture and crop management, conditioning crop efficiency and farmers' return of investment. The main objective for this technical event will be to offer a wide technical point of view about these subjects, but always trying to link all different issues within a real farming in a farmer-centricity approach. With that purpose, 8 45-minute presentations will be performed by 8 experts who develop their activity in different professional sectors in both proposed subjects, leaving 15 minutes among them for questions for our site or streaming attenders. It is well known by farmers and agronomists, agriculture is trying to adapt itself to an unexpected new context. But it should be considered that what it is going to face in a short time with a completely different socioeconomic and climate context is going to require all our knowledge and the skills. But instead of talk about worrying problem, we think we should consider that we have an amazing challenge ahead. So let's go with the first presentation displayed by Dr. Raúl Compés. I want to point that because of unexpected problems in his agenda, presentation was recorded some days before. Before starting, we want to thank Mr. Compés for his great effort and willingness to participate in this event. Mr. Compés is an agricultural engineer, PhD in agricultural engineering, currently working for UPV University as professor of the Department of Economics and Social Science and director of the Institute in Spain of the International Center for Advanced Mediterranean Agronomic Studies in Zaragoza. Vice-President of the European Association of Wine Economists, and Academic Coordinator of the Economics Area in the Wine Technology Platform, member of the Spanish delegation to the International Organization of Vine and Wine. He has been director of the official master in agri-food economics and environment of the UPV and the master in management and planning of foreign trade in the company of the UPV and director of 6 courses. He has co-edited and as executive editor 3 books awarded by the OAV. He has collaborated in postgraduate programs and in different courses. Mr. Compés will develop the presentation, The Wine Sector in the Face of Climate Change, in a real successful approach of his sector to the context, considering all the key points. Okay. As I said, just after the presentation, you will have 15 minutes in order to report your questions about the presentation. But in this case, considering that Mr. Compés is not going to attending, this is going to be displayed from the second presentation, right? People who is attending will report directly to the speaker the questions, and people who is attending by streaming can use the email that they can watch in the displays.
Good morning. I am Raúl Compés, the current director of CIEN Zaragoza, that it is the center of the Centre International de Haute Études Agronomiques Méditerranéen in Spain. And I am going to present a topic with the title of the wine sector in face of the climate change challenge. Thank you very much to the Stoller Chair and to the Universidad Politécnica de Valencia, my university, for the invitation. And let's start. Well, the official title is The Wine Sector in the Face of Climate Change. The basic reading is this book with the title in Spanish, El sector vitivinícola frente al desafío del cambio climático. It's a book has been awarded by the Organisation Internationale de la Vigne et du Vin in 2099. And here, if you are interested, you can find all the information that I am going to present here, and you can, by free, download this book from the Cajamarca web. Okay, I have divided my presentation in 4 points. In the first point, we are going to see how climate change affects the wine sector. Second is focused in the impacts of climate change on the wine sector. The third is devoted to mitigation strategies and measures. And the fourth is devoted to adaptation strategies and measures. Well, let's see first how climate change affects the wine growing activity. Well, the impact is very high, and the effects are very important. First, because the vine is a very sensitive plant to climatological factors, the temperature, rainfall, and light, and rest of events, climatic events, and therefore its physiology is very vulnerable to climatic change. The second argument is that climate plays the most crucial role, as it is the most difficult factor to control in wine growing, hence the wealth and diversity of grapes and wines worldwide. Third, climate change affects the yield of the vineyard, the organoleptic composition of the grapes, in sugars, acids, aromas, and therefore the quality and typical characteristic of the wines. So finally, climate is one of the factors that it is called in the world wine the terroir, I mean the expression in the wine of all the characteristics related to the production, included the soil, included the man, included the way to produce. And finally, grape wine is very resistant plant. And in fact, we can produce wine if a lot of different places with a lot of different climates, but that we call good wines, or we consider good wines, even if this good objective is subjective and can be different depending on the consumers. But in general, the good wines are produced only in regions with very particular climatological conditions. So we cannot change easily the land to produce good wines everywhere. In fact, here you see a world map where with two colors we can see some of the most important countries that produce wine in the world. In green color we see that it is called the New World of Wine, and in orange that we call the Old Wine World. So if we analyze how many countries produce wine and grapes, we can find that wine is produced in 73 countries. But most of these countries and most of this production is focused in that we call regions of Mediterranean climate. And these regions are located in the northern hemisphere and southern hemisphere between 30 and 50 degrees of latitude. So we can produce wine and grapes for wine in other parts, in other latitudes, but a priori we can expect that at that moment the quality will not be good enough. Well, let's see the second point on what are the impacts of climate change on the growing sector. Well, we have seen before that wine production is focused, is specialized in the regions of Mediterranean climate. And what are the expectations? What are the general changes in climate expected in most growing regions of the world of Mediterranean climate? In general, that we expect, taking into account the change of the last years in these regions, are an increase in temperature, an increase in evapotranspiration, an increase in the heat waves, cold waves and droughts, greater frequency of extreme events, hail, spring frost and rainstorms, a change in rainfall patterns, less in winter and spring, and increased variability of precipitations, and in general increased water scarcity. We expect too an increase in soil aridity and erosion, a reduction in soil fertility, and an increase in climate hazards. In general, as you can see, the perspective is not very good for these regions of the world with this Mediterranean climate, but we have to pay attention, because we cannot generalize and to say it, and that the conditions, at least in the short term and in the medium term, are going to be worse for all the areas, even if they are located in these Mediterranean regions. And why? Why? Well, because in these regions, in these Mediterranean regions, we can find different ecosystems, different orientations, different altitude, different position related to the seas, to the oceans, to the rivers, and all these elements create different conditions, and depending on a particular location, maybe, at least, I repeat, in the short term, we can find negative, okay, but two, at least in some cases and in some periods, positive benefits. For instance, we expect a higher temperature. Okay, on the right side, we see that these high temperatures can create negative effects like increased in heat stress, decrease in quality, increase in alcohol content, excess vegetative growth, risk of fires, fires near the vineyards, increase in pest, and increase in yield variability, not only reduction, but to variability. But in some other regions, imagine, for instance, in Spain, Galician coast, Atlantic coast, imagine, for instance, thinking Rías Baixas denomination, okay, with a lot of rain precipitation, relatively medium temperature, increase in temperatures can produce positive effects as a quicker growth period and, for instance, lower risk of frost. Okay, the same occurs with lower precipitation. Lower precipitation, if we are thinking in Valencia or we are thinking in Murcia, the consequences can be very negative for producers. Increase in episodes of drought frequency, greater risk of fires, decrease in yield, and increase in water scarcity, mainly in the period of growth and maturity of the plant, I mean in the summer. But in other places, as we can mention before, in Galicia, lower precipitation means produces lower risk of diseases in humid areas, less use of the pesticides, and an improvement of the quality in these areas. And finally, an increase in this rainfall can produce in dry lands an increase in erosion, greater risk of diseases, but can also produce a positive effect, like to increase the content of water in the. Well, in general, taking into account all these effects, but the effects in the most places of production, we can expect, we are already seeing, because these effects are not only a prediction in the short or medium term. This is something that it is already occurring during the last years. And these technological effects are negative in general. Okay, the first is earlier harvest. The phenological phases, the bud break, the flowering, variation, and crop cycle are brought forward and shortened. Faster berry growth and quicker ripening. I mean, all the phases of the production are arriving before. This effect is creating that it is called unripe berries. It means that time lag between maturation of pulp, that it is called technological maturation, that produce sugar, that produce the alcohol, and the skin maturity, that it is due to the phenological content that creates the aromas and flavors. It doesn't match, okay? I mean, it is necessary more time to produce the phenologic maturation and the technological maturation. With an increase of the temperatures, maybe the content in sugar is good, it's okay, but the content in phenolic components is enough. Well, these grapes that come from these vineyards suffering this effort, they produce the must out of balance. This must, they have a lower acidity. It is also an effect of a rise in the pH of the must, and the wines coming from the must are more susceptible to stability and conservation problems. So in general, we can expect wines of lower quality and less fine wines. Wines with more alcohol, less acidity, alters aromas, less color, and more aggressive tannins, with a taste more astringent. And finally, this alteration of the wine characteristics can create some problems with the rules of the most protected denomination of origin or protected geographical indication, because in this model of quality, producers they have to respect some rules that have been thought for a specific climatic conditions. If these climatic conditions change, maybe the new wines, the wines coming from the climate change phenomenon are not going to fit well, and this creates a challenge for these denominations. Should they change the rules in order to fit, in order to permit and to allow produce maybe new varieties or wines with different conditions? This is something to think about. Well, that we can expect too is a change in wine growing geography across the world. Well, there are a lot of papers about how the wine geography is going to change in the world due to the climate change. But one of the most famous is this one with the title Climate Change, Wine and Conservation, that has been published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science of the United States in 2013 by different authors. Here they have done an exercise of projection about how the wine sector will be in 2050 in the worst conditions. I mean, if the trends of the past in terms of emissions of CO2 and increase of temperatures finally occur. This is the worst scenario, and supposing that not big measures of adaptation can solve the problem. So the perspectives are not very, very good. One of the results is the area suitable for viticulture would decrease from 25 to 73% in major wine-producing regions by 2050 due to climate change. And the main author, he says that the fact is that climate change will lead to a huge shake-up in the geographic distribution of wine production. So in any continent and on any scale, country, region, county, etc., unequal territorial impacts occur. And this is going to be very hard effect in Europe. Let's see some maps that allow us to understand the challenge or the amplitude and the risk of for a lot of regions to lose the production of grape and wine. So you have there, we can see there a map of the world with some parts in 3 different colors. In green, we can see the areas of wine production that are going to maintain, to keep the production. They can adapt to the increase of the temperatures, and the rest of the effects of climate change. In red, we are seeing the current producers or region that are going to lose the production because the wine production in these regions won't be possible, or the quality will be too low in order to have the necessary quality. And in the blue, we see the new areas of production, areas where currently wine production doesn't exist or it is insignificant, but that in the next years, if the prediction of the experts finally occur, wine production will be possible and the quality will improve. As this map is too big and the details are relatively difficult to appreciate there, we are going to focus in the next maps in the most important regions. And you will see in every region the magnitude of the green color is good, adaptation is possible. Red color, adaptation is not possible, and the risk of loss of production is very high. And blue color are, at least in the short term, the winners of the climate change. Okay, you can see here the California, the Oregon and Washington, the main states where wine is produced in the United States of America. You can see a lot of red color in California, even in Mexico, in Baja California, and more blue color in the north. And this trend, we are going to appreciate it in all the continents, in all the big regions. Okay, towards the north in the northern hemisphere and towards the south in the southern hemisphere, you are going to see new areas, and near the equator, the red color is the most important. Well, in South America, the red color is dominant, mainly in Argentina, and we can appreciate some green color near the coast, and mainly the blue color is in the mountains, where the altitude allows some better conditions because the temperatures are relatively temperate and where the rains are more important. The case of South Africa is similar, a lot of red color, sun green, and in this case, very small part of blue. So in this case for South Africa, if this prognostic is good, the perspectives for the wine sector are not very good. The case of Australia is similar. First red, second green, and third blue, mainly in Tasmania and in the coast, in the southeast part. And Nueva Zelanda, that it is a relatively small producer, but with some very high quality and high prices. Sauvignon Blanc wines coming from New Zealand are very prestigious. We see blue color and green color. So we could say that for New Zealand, climate change is not a big issue, a big concern. Well, in Europe, we see clearly two Europes. The southern Europe, where the red color is dominant, and the blue color in the northern is dominant. We could say in general that the south of Europe, crossing under a line that crosses France in the middle, is going to lose, unless we can see in the case of Spain, we see in the north and the Iberican Cordillera mountains, where the conditions are colder, are more humid, we see blue and green. But in general, it dominates the red. And in the north of Europe, in theory, is the winner. And we have already seen an increase of production of wine in the south of England, in Germany. Germany, in theory, also one of the winners, at least in the short term, of climate change, and in the rest of Central and Northern Europe. Well, the case of Spain is really very difficult, because if we use different index of availability for wine production, Hagelin index that takes into account the luminosity and the light hours and the temperature, the index of cold and night index and the dryness index, and we compare them, the past situation, the baseline in the left, and we compare with the prediction for the period 31-50, taking into account different models and different scenarios, we see that in the three indexes, the red color increase and the orange color too, and it covers more than a half of the Spanish territory. So it indicates in the same pattern that the former paper, that the conditions for wine production in Spain, unless and except in the north of Spain and in the mountains in a given altitude, the conditions are going to worse. So there are not good news in this sense. Well, mitigation strategies in the wine sector contribute to climate change, the greenhouse effects, because they produce CO2 and other greenhouse gases, and some measures are being adopted as the rest of the sectors to reduce these emissions. Some comments about the mitigation strategies and some data. Well, the first is the wine chain. The wine production has its own responsibility, and this has been estimated in the 0.3% of the total annual greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, so the wine supply chains contribute and approximates 0.3%. That we can consider that it is not a big quantity, but anyway, it is something important, taking into account that we are comparing with the total of emissions of all the activities in the world. Well, the gas and the most important gas is the CO2. Okay, and the production into O2 as fertilizer. But in global, the emissions are important in the vine grind, in the grape growing. Okay, by the use of nitrogen as fertilizer. Second, in the bottling and packaging, and mainly, and in a lot of cases, the source of emissions, the most important, is during the transport and distribution. Okay. So, what is being done by the wine sector in order to mitigate, in order to fight against these emissions through all the wine chains? Well, one of the main tools, and it is very important to know, in addition of the horizontal tools that in a lot of countries and chains and regions has been adopted during these times, the most important tool and more characteristics are the specific certification. And almost all big wine producing countries have their own specific certifications. Here in this map, you can see how in California, in Chile, in Argentina, in South Africa, in Australia, in New Zealand, of course, in the big European wine producers of Portugal, Spain, and Italy, and Germany, the oil sector, okay, the wine sector in each country has been able to create a specific certification, voluntary certifications, with different names. Sometimes the name is sustainability, in other cases is just climate change indicated in the certification. But the idea of all this certification is to reduce the negative impact and to improve the environmental conditions of wine production. And the main elements, the main components of these certifications are a better water management in order to reduce the water consumption, a reduction of the waste, a better energy efficiency in order to reduce the consumption of energy, and an increase of the use of renewable energy. And besides all these elements, in almost all these specific certifications, we can find a reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. And finally, the vineyard, the grape production is a source of zinc, as other similar crops and wine and production, mainly in the phase of grape production, can assimilate, can absorb CO2 reduction, and like that, it reduces the problem of mitigation. And it has been calculated, there are a lot of research papers trying to measure the capacity of the vineyards to absorb CO2, and it depends of several factors as the age of the vineyard and so on, but as an average has been estimated a capacity of absorption from 5 to 5.5 tons of CO2 by hectare. If we consider that in Spain we have near 1 million of hectares, the amount of CO2 absorbed by year would be of about 5 million tons of CO2. Okay, and let's see the last point devoted to the adaptation strategies and main measures. In the short term, it is very important because the capacity of the sector to survive in the red areas, following the speech of the paper that we have shown before, is to adaptate. Without adaptation, in a lot of area, maybe we are going to see a reduction in the crop of vineyards during the next year. So here we can see the global framework to understand the different measures that can be adopted, taking into account the gravity of the problem from the left to the right in the x-axis. We can see the different measures. If the situation is not very bad, okay, we can adopt the packet located on the left, cambios técnicas enológicas on the left. If the situation, if the increase of the temperature is very high, in the worst scenario, we will need, producers will have to adopt the more extreme measures, like changes in the location of the vineyard. And the same occurs with the cost of and the difficulty of this adaptation, because not all the measures have the same cost. In some cases, the cost is relatively low. It is easy to adapt, okay, and this occurs with the measures that are optimum, the best. If the temperature doesn't increase very much, for instance, then the changes in enological techniques, but for the more radical measures, the cost is very high. And this is a real barrier, a real obstacle for producers to adapt to climate change in the more in-risk areas. Let's see with some detail some characteristics of these big four adaptation strategies. Well, the first, and the level one means if the situation is not bad, that it's indicated is the adaptation measures in wine making. And we can find winemaking practices to correct the must affected by climate change. What are these techniques or practices? Desalcoholization and acidification of wines, for instance, with tartaric acid. Second, through the biotechnology, we can use yeast with low alcohol yield. I mean, yields that during the fermentation, they produce less alcohol from the same amount of sugar. And this yeast contribute to produce with a high sugar content in the most wines with relatively acceptable alcohol content. And later we can find a lot of technology that has been and is being developed nowadays just to improve this mast, okay? The canter system, thermovinification, ultrasonic extraction, etc. Level 2 are measures of adaptation in grain growing, but in the vineyard. Wine practices for crop management. Here, the general goal is to delay the phenological cycle and the maturation, to reduce excess heat and to allow a correct alcoholic fermentation, alcoholic maturity, but to a phenological maturity. So we can use the next measures, protect clusters from direct sunlight, late leaf thinning, late pruning, change the type of bean tutoring, producing higher buyers, getting that the grapes are far from the soil. We can use in some places a soil cover and mulching plant cover to maintain the moisture, microorganisms, and organic matter. We can use irrigation. In fact, we will see that irrigation is one of the most important measures of adaptation. We can use that it is called precision wine growing and to cluster thinning to improve the phenolic maturity of the grape. Well, here this curve shows us how the vineyards in Spain has been or are being most irrigated. In the 90s, at the beginning of the 90s, the amount of vineyards irrigated was very symbolic, between 2 and 3. In fact, it was banned to irrigate. But once this prohibition has been eliminated, the share of land of production of wine irrigated increases. And today, I think the last figures I have seen indicate that near 40% of vineyards in Spain are irrigated. Level 3 is to change the vineyard, because in the level 2, in the same vineyard, we could adapt, we could reduce some of the worst effects of climate change. But when it is not enough, where it is not enough change in the crop techniques, we have to change the plantation. Well, I mean, sometimes it means to raise up, to remove the old vineyards and to plant new vineyards. In these new vineyards, adapted to climate change, some elements that have a special interest are, for instance, the orientation of the rows. The north-south orientation is not good because the vineyards, the grapes receive too much light in the afternoons, and this light can burn grapes. And the best orientation would be the row in the east-west direction. Well, in this scenario, has even more importance the plant material, the root stock, and we should take into account and be very carefully with the patron that we are going to use, taking into account, for instance, the resistance to the dryness. Okay, the varieties is more important in a scenario of climate change. And the variety now and in the future should be chosen not only in a commercial consideration, and it is important, and this will continue being important. And the best varieties will be these varieties that produce the wines more demanded for the consumers. But climate change, capacity of adaptation of the varieties in a particular location is very important. Look at, for instance, this picture, where we can see in the same vineyard 2 different rows with 2 different varieties. Okay, these pictures come from Zaragoza vineyard in Campo de Borja, famous for the Garnacha. On the left side in the picture, we see a good vineyard. I mean, the plants are green. We cannot appreciate signs of stress, hydric stress, and it is a Garnacha, but it is very, very well adapted because this is the traditional, one of the traditional varieties of this land, of this location. But look at the Merlot, Merlot coming from the north, coming from France, from places more humid with less temperature, and the same day, the same vineyard, we see how the plant is suffering hydric stress. We can see some seeds already completely dead. And in the most extreme situations, where planting a new vineyard in the same place where former vineyard was situated is not enough. We have to move, in theory, because it is not very easy to move the vineyard, but we can find here some measures of adaptation. Shift the vineyard to cooler sites, and cooler sites in general means to higher altitude in the mountains and to higher latitude. We have appreciated this capacity of adaptation in the maps of the 23 work on the paper that we have analyzed before. So we can see how this aspect of altitude, latitude is important, but the orientation too. In the past, very often in a valley, usually in the river valley, we find different slopes. Maybe one slope is oriented towards the north, and the other opposite slope is oriented towards the south. Well, maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, the best slope, the best orientation was this one oriented towards the south. Now it's different. Now in some places, the south-oriented slopes are not very good because they receive too soon, the temperature is too high with the effects that we already know, and by the opposite, the northern slopes are more and more demanded. Well, we can find the highest vineyard in the world in Salta, in Argentina. This vineyard is situated in 3,111 meters altitude, and this vineyard belongs to, it's called the Colomé Winery, and the owner is, I think, is a Swiss or a German man, is Donald Hess. And in Europe, in continental Europe, the highest vineyard is in Spain, is in la Sierra de la Contraviesa, in la Alpujarra de Granada. And the winery is called Bodega Barranco Oscuro, and is situated in 1,280 meters, and the vineyards are planted up 1,368 meters. Well, this is all for my part. Thank you very much for your attention. It has been a pleasure for me. Happily, I cannot be with you in Valencia. I cannot neither to be connected, but I hope this presentation will give you more ideas and before more capacity to assess the gravity of the climate change challenge for the viticulture, for the wine production, and where a lot of effort must be done for the agricultural engineering and the rest, of course, of specialties related to the wine production. Thank you very much, and I hope to see you in another occasion. Adios. Bye.
Well, we want to thank, because of the great effort that Dr. Compés has developed in order to record this presentation. And along all the process, his willingness has been clear, and he was really convinced about the possibilities of this Stoller Chair Technical Sessions. So thanks a million to Dr. Compés. Well, considering that we are not going to have the questions turn, we are going to move forward to the following presentation that we will develop by Gustavo Maia. Professor Gustavo Maia is MS in Biological Science by the University of Sao Paulo, PhD in Forest Science and Plant Biological by the University of Sao Paulo as well, PhD in Plant Stress Physiology, currently working as full-time professor at the Federal University of Pelotas, head of the Interdisciplinarity Evaluation and Planning of PGD's programs, concretely being coordinator of the PhD in Plant Physiology in the same university. For 6 years, he was member of the steering committee of the Brazilian Society of Plant Physiology. Professor Gustavo Maia has more than 10 relevant scientific results on papers related to the research line on which he has collaborated, and he has been awarded with 2 scholarships to continue providing knowledge and research focused on new technologies for agriculture based on plant-plant communication. Dr. Gustavo Maia will develop the presentation Rethinking Plants Stress in an Ever-Changing Environment, from Machines toward Complex Cognitive Systems, where he will focus in signaling transmission in plants and each other, and their memory pathways.
It's not the first. Okay. No. It's not the first one. Yeah. Put in the first one. Yeah, thank you. Buenos dias a todos. I will speak in English because I'm a Brazilian. I don't speak Spanish very well, so you need to take my English. So, first of all, congratulations to the organizing committee, especially the staff of Stoller Europe and the people of the Polytechnical Valencia. I think it's an excellent opportunity to bring together producers, academics, students, professors, and companies, because we have a huge problem to solve. So I think this kind of meeting is the best opportunity to try to find and rethinking some new possibilities. But my talk is a little bit weird because I'm a plant physiologist, but I'm also a biological theorist. So my work is thinking about basic concepts such as what is stress, what is a plant itself, and from almost 3 decades I am thinking in these basic concepts to improve possible technological solutions for us. So all my science is based on philosophical questions. But don't worry, my philosophical side will still in backstage, so I will talk as a scientist with you. Oops, sorry. How can I change? It's not working. Oh my God, it's not changing. Okay. Technical issues. So, today I'd like to share with you my experience as a scientist work with a company. And I have more than 10 years with Stoller partnership. So I'm leading of the LASEV. LASEV is the Laboratory of Plant Cognition and Electrophysiology. We are developing theoretical studies and practical ones. So I'd like to show you how thinking in... the pointer. So I'd like to show you how rethinking some basic concepts could be a basis for new technologies. So my ideas is to show you how you can think in new physiological solutions. Signing by Stoller is a new product derivated from this partnership in the last maybe 5 years, if I don't know. And we are working right now in possible breakthrough technologies for agriculture. It's why I'm here to talk with you. So, oh. Okay. Oh my God, it's not working very well. Sorry. Not working. No, I can work in here, and I change it. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. So why we need new ideas, new solutions? Because we have a huge problem to face. The problem is to feed a growing population around the world, and especially to feed a new demand of people in developing countries that have more access to food. That's a good problem at all. But climate change brings to us very challenging scenario. For instance, almost 60% of the potential of crops are reduced because of biotic and abiotic stresses. My work is focused in soybean and abiotic stress in Brazil. I am a Brazilian scientist, so I will share with you what you are doing in Brazil in this science with Stoller. But especially in Brazil, our huge problem is heat stress, even more than nutritional stress in plants. It's a very limiting factor for us because normally we have no single factor affecting plant growth. All factors in nature, heat, drought, highlight, are mixed together. So we have a very complex situation that plants need to face. So there is no single cause of stress in the field conditions. Why not? Why? Because depends of the severity, the intention, the intensity of the heat, the intensity of the drought, the intensity of the highlight. The duration, how long was the drought? How long the plants are exposed to heat, for instance? The number of exposures. During the life cycle, how many times plant face droughts, plant face high temperature peaks, plant face whatever else. And the combination, because for instance in Brazil, it's very common, we have drought, but high temperature and highlight situation. So how plant can face all these things at the same time? And another factor is that these responses of plant depends of the genotype, of course, the cultivars, but the stage of development. One thing is plant face drought, for instance, after germination. Another totally different thing is the same plant face drought in the vegetative stage, and another different one is when plant is in a reproductive stage. So when we think all these possible combinations, we have no single solution. We are far from a single solution, actually. So how plants can face all these things? So normally, we not think much about that, but normally we consider plants as a reactive organic system. But plants are far from reactive organic system. Plants are sensing beings. Plants has the ability to perceive very tiny changes in amount of factors in the environment. Actually, each leaf, each shoot of plant sense different environments at the same time. It's very important to us because normally we think plants as a human model, because as a human, we feel cold, we feel hot, we will not feel cold and hot at the same time. We are thirsty or not, but not thirsty and full of water at the same time. But this happens with plants, because plants are modular systems. It's a very important issue to think about for the future technologies. What is a plant, actually? It's the main question. We don't know exactly, because we take a plant as ourselves, actually. But it's totally wrong. So, regardless the tissue is sensing, perceiving the different environmental cues, the perception itself is made at cellular level. At cellular level, plants have a huge amount of sensors, normally in membranes, that trigger a cascade of signal transduction inside to the nucleus, and the nucleus change the metabolic of the cell. But we have a feedback loop here, because genes have the codes, but the metabolism read the code, and the metabolism can read the same code at different ways, depend how plants are perceiving the different combinations of potential stress factor. It's not easy to understand. Then, at cellular level, plants start to change the tissue physiology, and then we have consequences at the whole plant level. So we have different scales of facts occurring at same times in the same plant, in different parts of the same plant. This is a good picture to understand what I say. Plants are, of course, sessile organisms. Plant can move if the conditions are not good. Plants need to face because they are sessile. But sessile organisms evolved a structure of the body that is modular. Plant, actually, you can understand plant not as a single individual. You couldn't understand plant as a population of modules, a population of parts. Why? Because each part of the plant, above ground or below ground, sense the microenvironments around it. A leaf in the top of a tree live in a very different environment than the leaves inside the crown. So, what is a plant, actually? Perceive that why I'm saying to you that at the same time, this part of the plant can be under high light and heat condition. In the same plant, other parts could be in low light and not so hot conditions. So at the same time, you have different situations in the same individual. Consider that what I say in the above ground is similar to the below ground. So plants are not machines. Plants are not organic things that you can manage as we wish. There is no simple solution. There is no a kind of manual that you need to follow. Oh, my plant is dying because it's dry. What I need to do? It's not right anywhere. You need to think about what's happening in local situation. It's why we need to think plants as a cognitive system. So in these papers, we have demonstrated how difficult it is to identify a stress situation. There is no single indicator, no single indicator. From decades, in every meeting I am, people ask me all the time, Gustavo, what is the best indicator to indicate drought in plants? What is the best indicator to identify or diagnose heat and so on? There is no single indicator. Why? Because plants are a very complex organism living in different places at the same time. Need to dealing with tiny micro environments across the whole plant. So it's very, very complicated as well. And more than that, you can think, but there is a gene that is responsive to drought. Okay, of course, we need genetic information to have metabolic compounds to face whatever else. But the question is, we have a different scale of organization in the plants. So we have genes, but these genes can be read in different ways, but we have feedback loops in the metabolism. You have communication between cells, you have communication between tissues, you have communication throughout the plants, as I will show you. So we have no single indication. You need to think in another way. You need to think in a more complex manner to understand what you're facing, because the challenges are huge, as I said before. And why why to consider plant as cognitive system could be worth? Because plants are cognitive systems. According to who, Gustavo? According to cognitive scientists. Because if you see this process of perceiving, signaling, and respond of a plant, as I wish I show you, this is pretty similar of the general model of a cognition system. So what is a cognition system? Cognition system is a system that have continual perception of the surroundings, internal information process, access to previous or current internal state, I will talk about that, and after all that, produce coherent responses to the perceived stimulus. So plants are cognitive systems, are not machines. Plants, of course, are different from us because plants are brainless. Plants have no brain. But plants have a powerful network to perceive processing information in real time to respond to the situation that plants are faced, as I will show you. So, cognitive systems have some basic properties. For instance, memory and learning, decision-making ability, attention, and maybe intention, and self-awareness. So, Gustavo, plants have memory. Plants pay attention. Plants are aware of the environment. Yes. All the research in the last decade, we are contributing a point to this new picture about plants. Plants are cognitive systems. For instance, memory. Memory is a very, very important characteristic for plants. Memory is basically a stored information that can be retrieved. It's different from fingerprint. It's different from genetic information. Memory can be built throughout the time, and as plants face different challenges throughout this development cycle, plants are storing information about the past, which can we can contribute for higher tolerance in the future. It's a very interesting, and we have actually we have literally hundreds of papers considering this idea of memory implants. And I think that memory implants have a huge consequence, not just for the understanding of a plant, but for the new technologies. Why? Because we have identified that some mechanism of memory, which is epigenetic mechanism, could create memories that cross generations. We call transgeneration memory. It's very important because in a study of a PhD student of mine, for instance, we discovered that depends of the place we bought the seeds for some area, the memory that the seeds have, changing completely the ability of the seeds to face drought, to face heat. So, of the same cultivar, actually, the difference is the area that produce those seeds. So, the same seeds, the same seeds from the same cultivar with different provenance could respond very different in different places of production. That's it, transgeneration memory. Actually, in our study, we follow 3 generations of memory from the original place of where seeds were produced. It's amazing because now we can use this capacity that plants have to learn. So we can teach plants, as I said. So because this new understanding that plants are not machines, plants are complex cognitive systems, the abilities, some abilities of cognition such as memory, we have proposed a new concept of stress, a concept that considers memory. So we have different effects to the same plant, but with different memories. There is no single solution. Depends of the past. Depends what plants learn during their lives. So we have incorporated the idea, the memory component in the new concept. We also incorporate the idea of different levels of organization. There is no single indicator. We have, I know, I am a plant physiologist. I know we need to measure something to diagnose a plant stress situation, but there is no single indicator. We need to start to bring with multifactorial parameters. So, because it's very important, put together scientists, producers, and companies, because it's not so cheap, because we need a lot of money to plan new platforms, to analyze plants in different scales. And, most important, real time. The responses of plants are very fast sometimes. So, 1 hour, few minutes, days, makes a huge difference to diagnose some stress situation. So real-time diagnosis is very important too. So some people, including myself, are thinking plants as intelligence. Why? Because intelligence is not a human ability. We have a lot of definitions of intelligence. Intelligence, it's the ability of a particular agent to solve problems. And plants are very, very good to solve problems. We need to help them to solve their problems. So, some traits as perception, memory, processing, attention, and decision-making are part of this new framework to understand plants as intelligent beings. Here, we have some studies with the first evidence that plants have the possibility to pay attention to some stimuli, some stronger stimuli, because, as I told you, plants face different stimuli, different combination of stimulus at the same time. So, depending of the situation, plant can pay attention for a stimulus more than another. It's a very interesting theoretical hypothesis, but we have some evidence about that. Unfortunately, I have no time to share with you. I just are picking some works we have carried out about that. So, are plants intelligent? But what is intelligence after all? As I said, we have more than 10 concepts of intelligence. So intelligence is not a mental thing, it's not a mathematical ability, it's not a human characteristic. Intelligence is a ability of agents, meaning system that can perceive, process, and respond in real time to what is going on in the environment. In other words, adapt in real time. So plants are not reactants. Plants not react. Plant has agency. It's a very huge, different manner to think about plants. So, listen what these guys have to say. We have a lot of theoretical papers, applied papers, seeking for a new understanding of plants with great possibilities to propose new technologies, as I will show you. So, as I said, plant, of course, has no brain. So, how is possible to manage such complex information in the environment? Plant has no brain, but plant has a powerful network of signaling processing. Very, very, very powerful. In same aspects comparable to our brain, as I will show you. So, more than machines, plants need to integrate different signals, different information that gathering in different modules. This study is very interesting, showing that when a single leaf is stimulated by different environmental factors, for instance, highlight and heat, the response at a distance is different than the simple sum of highlight responses and heat responses. So, when a leaf is exposed to a highlight and another one is exposed to heat stress, again, the responses at the systemic tissue is very different. Very, very different. So all the cues that plant perceive is somehow integrated in the whole body of the plant, triggering an expected response. We just starting to understand how plants do it, this kind of integration. So normally the studies is with our rat lab, the Arabidopsis thaliana, but you can think considering a bigger tree. How a bigger tree integrates the very different responses through its whole body. It's necessary a very powerful process of signaling crossing the whole plant. So when a plant perceives in a specific local some environmental disturbance, a lot of systemical signals are produced, such as calcium waves. We have reactive oxygen species waves. We have a lot of metabolites like hormones and electrical signals. Electrical signals are the, after hydraulic ones, are the faster signals plant used to spread the news throughout the whole body. What is electrical signals? I don't know. Unfortunately, this kind of knowledge is not common in the academic. A few people knows that plants has electrical signaling, pretty much like our brains. It's the same mechanism used by our neurons. So electrical signals basically is a transient ions imbalance at plasma membrane levels. We have, as you know, the membranes are polarized. Inside the cells, you have a predominance of negative charges, and outer the cells, you have a predominance of positive ones. So we have a kind of electrical equilibrium. But when this equilibrium is affected, we have a depolarization of the membrane, and a restoration of the polarization very fast. So we have a transient of polarization. We have repolarization in the membranes. In the bioelectrical signals goes fast and reaching far, as I show. This is a movie, speed up, but you can look for yourselves. This is a calcium wave spreading throughout the plant after a tiny stimulus in this part of the plant. It's very cool. I will show you again. Very cool. I love this movie. Again, in few seconds, a single response at a tiny part of the plant is spread throughout the plants. So when you touch a plant, this happens. When an insect land in a leaf, this happens. When, I don't know, use your imagination, when electric fields impact a plant, this happens. All that is possible to be perceived by the plant trigger this kind of signal throughout the plant. So we have different modes of electrical signals in plants. It's more complex than our brain works because neurons has only action potential, but in plants we have action potential, voltage potential, system potential, and other kind of electrical signals depend of the stimuli, depend of the intensity of the stimuli. We have different types of electrical signals in plants. But we recently realized that different than neurons, this kind of electrical signals, considering the whole plant, are superposed. Is what you have, it's a general imbalance of charges in the plants. We call that electron, plant electron, and we have actually oscillatory signal. So we are starting to think in plants as electronic interface. This is it's a example of a typical electron profile in plants. At first glance, we can see anything. There is noise, isn't it? But it's pretty similar than the brain waves. This is a kind of EEG, so you can have dynamical similarities between EEG in human brains and electron implants. And most important, we have information in the electron implant. There is not a noisy signal. We have a lot of information, include these spike-like signals. We, investigating by mathematical analysis, computer analysis, we have identified information in these different electrical signals in plants. So through mathematical analysis, through machine learning techniques, we are able today to identify through electron what is going on with a plant, even in the field, So we have built a sensor, an electrical sensor, use this electrical sensor to measure electron in plants, and then we have a mathematical process, and then we run a machine learning, trained machine learning, of course, to identify what is going on with the plants, just looking for this kind of crazy signal. And now we are uncovering patterns everywhere. We know that electron profile to a specific plant pathogen is different from another pathogen. We have identified different electron profiles during the ripening of tomato fruit, so we can, by the electron, identify the stage of the ripening of the fruits. Under few conditions, it's an unpublished results. We have identified phenological stages of soybean under field conditions using electron in our machine learning processes. So the sky is limit, considering this kind of technique to diagnosis in real time. So we are building this new perspective of plants as cognitive living beings. Part of this theoretical studies is in this paper, co-authored by Marc-William de Bono. De Bono is a neuroscientist in France. So it's a very interdisciplinary science. We need plant physiologists, we need agronomists, we need mathematicians, we need neuroscientists, we need everyone has interest to understand with plants to create this new understanding. And what's next? Now, we are studying the sociability of the plants. Plants are more than individuals, are more than agents. Plants literally communicate each other. Not in the terms of allelopathic studies we know a long time, but plants can exchange a plethora of signals from volatile organic compounds to electrical signals to light signals. We have a lot of ways of plant-plant communication. We are just uncovering this right now, but I think it is one of the possibilities of breakthrough technologies. Understand how plant communication and talk with them in terms of managing, of course. So we need to think outside the box, considering these new perspectives of plants. And I try to. So right now, as I told you, we have new physiological solutions. Signing by Stoller is one. Signing, I think, is just a product in Brazil. I think in Europe we have, you have no? Okay. So signing was a product based on this new perspectives of how plants can signaling between modules. So we have tested new kind of molecules, improving the ability to signaling in the plant to help plants, because plants know very, very well how to communicate inside, but we are help some way. So the first results under field conditions of sign brings, I think, good results about improving development, better tolerance to stress conditions, as actually sign, not the sign, but the science behind the sign was thought in to improve the capacity to plant tolerate stress. So, but the results in the field conditions show that this sign can improve somehow the production regardless the conditions. But we need more tests at this time. But sign is already there. What is almost there? Almost there is the new technology to transform plants and sensors, because all the agriculture is based on environmental sensor. We read atmosphere temperatures, we read soil moisture, we read chemicals in the soil. Everything we collect of information is not about plants, but about the surroundings. But what surroundings change is not the same way that plants can change. So we need ask directly to the plant what is going on. So we need real-time sensors using plant information, not environment information, in real time. So we have a first prototype of this bioelectrical sensor running the machine learn and the different mathematical time series analysis. This prototype was tested under field conditions in the last 2 years with very, very good results, way far than we expected first. It's a good. And coming next, we starting to exploring the plant's internet network. We are starting the new studies in my lab to understand how plants communicate stress signal between different individuals. We know, because of the literature also, but because of our own results, that plants spread the news. Plants are gossip individuals. When plants are affected by I don't know, by a drought, by a heat wave, by a pathogen, plants can communicate this situation for another one that is far from this bad situation, and those plants can anticipate the responses. So we somehow it's idea. We can use this communication between plants. We can learn how plants communicate themselves and interfere in this communication process to help plants to take care of themselves under field conditions. It's the idea we are working now. So I don't know if I have more time, but I think it's all, folks. Thank you for your attention. And if you have some questions, I'm ready to try to respond. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Maia. Definitely you surprised to me, as you say.
In a good sense.
Yes, completely. I'm completely sure that we are going to change our perception about signaling and signal transmission between plants and inside them. And we are in a turn of questions, so please.
My name is Ioan Enoiu, alias John from Romania. Have you ever have the sense that the plants feel the specialist if the specialist is good and find the right solution? Because I have this sense many times. Thank you.
Yeah, me too. Actually, we have when you forgot what you learn in academy, when we try to feel plants, we perceive that they are much more than pure reactive machines. So what we are trying to do right now is bring this intuition to the academy. Fortunately, I think we are getting some success to reach a new comprehension, a comprehension that is much more close to the reality in the field. So sometimes people ask me, Gustavo, plants have feelings. My answer is, depends what you are meaning by feelings. But of course, plants do not have emotions. Plants have no rage, plants have no love, as far as you know. But plants feel the environment. Plants feel something like hungry, that heat. But it's very interesting because saying this for you, maybe, oh, Gustavo is crazy, Gustavo is a philosopher, forget what we're talking about. But the question is, science is based on concepts. Concepts are based on philosophical frameworks. If you change our way to think about things, change our philosophical framework, new concepts emerge, new ideas can come through. So we can see the same word in different ways. So I'm not trying to deny what is built until now in plant physiology, because I am a plant physiologist, I am a classic one. But I know we need a step further to solve that kind of problems. We need to a new understanding. We need to this feeling what this plant is. Thank you for your question.
Trevor Wignall from the National Institute of Agricultural Botany in the UK. Thank you, Gustavo. That was... Is that better? Can you hear now? Hi. Trevor Wignall from the National Institute of Agricultural Botany in the UK. Thank you, Gustavo. Very thought-provoking presentation. I'm very interested in the bioelectrical sensors because you talked about soil moisture sensors, temperature sensors, and a lot of my own work is with that sort of phytoclimate monitoring and telemetry. But it feels like, you know, that's the rear view mirror in a car. We can see what's happened in the past, but clearly the plant is detecting at a much finer level what's coming in the future. So how far away do you think we are from having a practical bioelectrical sensor that we can deploy to growers to anticipate stresses before they happen?
Thank you, Trevor, for the question. So, how can you answer? Right now, we know that you can have early diagnosis. For instance, through our sensor with plants infested by pathogens, we have the information about the infection 4 days or 5 days before we have the symptoms expressing the leaf. So, thinking in the growers, we give to them 4 or 5 days to take in advance the possible solutions. And this early diagnosis right now is pretty much spread regardless the kind of environmental perturbation that plants are suffering in the environment. And as I told you, the most of our work is under controlled situations, greenhouse, so on. And we have around 90% of accuracy to detect different stress situations anticipately. But for our surprise, in the first 2 studies running in the field, we have pretty much the same accuracy, regardless what is going on in the environment. Because under greenhouse conditions, you know, you can control water, you can control temperature, you can control everything. But under field conditions, we have no control at all. But plants knows what is happening. That's the trick. Plants knows. So even under a very noisy and unpredictable situation, we have around today around 80% of accuracy to detect what is going on. So our idea for a possible product is to use the environmental sensors to improve our capacity to diagnosis through electron. So I think combining the technologies, I think it is the best way. But right now, our prototype are very good to detect all sorts of plant responses. And as you said, that is important. Plants are let us know what is happening. We're not interfering about the environmental data. It's the most important improvement I think we are bringing in the next generation of biosensors, I hope.
Any other question? Well, Dr. Maia, I have a question for you. I would like to know for how long that stress adaptation signals remain in tissues or in plants, and if it is possible that these memory signals be transmitted during the fertilization or during the propagation.
That's, thank you, Vicente. That's a good question also. About memory, we have different types of memory lasting from minutes to weeks, to months, to generations. So we not understand the difference between short and long lasting memory. But we measure the effects of this kind of memories. And combining the communication studies between plants, the idea is exactly that what a plant memorizes can be learned to another one. Our first result is, it's a big yes. Yes. Plants that build some memories regarding previous experience somehow can transmit this learning to another plant. It's wonderful because how we never imagined that kind of collective learning among plants. So I think it is possible. There is some evidence that when a plant touches another, electrical signals could be shared among these plants. We know, as I told, electrical signals carry a lot of information about the memory of the plant. So we can maybe have an electrical network running in the field. We don't know about, but it's pretty much possible. We, as I told you, we are maybe exploring new frontiers of plant science, thinking all this at the same time, because as I told you, normally we don't think that plant can feel, we don't think that plant can learn. Actually, plants are growing objects that we can manage as a wish, and we can stimulate grow faster, we can stop the growing. We think we have very power on plants. We don't know. We don't know. We have much to learn with them to try to create new technologies. You need these new technologies, Vicente, because I don't know, I normally am an optimist, but I can see further with this kind of technology we have today to solve our problems. And our problems is getting worse. So we have new solutions. I don't know if this is the new solutions, but I think it is a new possible way to think about them. And the first results are very, very promising. Very promising. Thank you.
Thank you, completely agree. This is a key point. Any other question? Okay, so we are going to come in a break for lunch. The lunch is going to be served outside on the right. Please, if anyone have any kind of intolerance, just let the assistants and the check-in table know in order to adapt your menu, right? Okay, see you in an hour.